In this video, I'm going to give you the 3 questions that you can ask an atheist to make them stumble, to make them shut up, to make them realize that they don't know what they're talking about.
Oh, fantastic. 3 more questions that can be posed to atheists to make us shut up, which I think is kind of a weird way to put it, because whenever I ask questions of religious people, it's not for me to get them to shut up or anything like that. I usually ask questions so that they'll think deeper about their positions or maybe reconsider some things from a different point of view, not to make them stop thinking about stuff or not, consider things on a deeper level. Like, that just seems like a weird thing to want to do, in my opinion. But in any case, we're going to find out what 3 questions will stop atheists in their tracks, whatever tracks those might be. If you want to fuck around and find out what 3 questions may stump you, then please stay tuned. According to you, these are all like really stupid questions. Fucking dumb. What's up, heathens? How y'all doing? I'm the Godless Engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're taking a look at these 3 questions to see if 1, we really can't answer them, and 2, if it makes us just stop our conversation or makes us realize that we really don't know what in the fuck we're talking about. I sincerely doubt that any of these questions are going to stump me or are going to be bad for atheism in any kind of sense. I feel like these are probably things that we've all had to consider before. So, alright, so let's see what this guy's got.
Because the one thing that atheists always love to bring up is science. The one thing that atheists always love to bring up is science when people talk about God. Nowadays, more and more people are starting to be religious. More and more people are starting to be more spiritual. More and more people are starting to realize that, maybe there is a creator.
This is actually not true. Pew Research actually does studies on the religious landscape regularly. And the last time that data was collected, the nuns group, or the group of people that don't religiously affiliate with any denomination or any religion in general, has risen to 21%, which means that the religious population, or the population of adults that claim to be part of any one particular religion, has definitely fallen. And since the turn of the millennium, according to Gallup, the number of church-going people has dwindled greatly. So it seems like more people are not turning to God and are in fact turning away from religion in general. He also mentioned that atheists love to bring up science in regard to any discussion on God. I don't really see it so much as bringing up science as much as it's just discussing the reasons why we don't believe in God. And we use science in order to know what really exists in reality. And because there is no evidence, no good evidence at least, that points towards God's existence, I can see how it would seem like we're constantly appealing to science in order to disregard God as a viable conclusion. But in reality, we appeal to not only science, but also philosophical arguments against God, logical arguments against specific definitions of God. So it's not only science that we appeal to. It's only when people present claims that science definitely has an opinion about. Science is only really discussed when claims are made that directly involve science or directly involve providing empirical evidence for some kind of conclusion.
As books like the Quran, as books like the Bible, as books like the Old Testament, get proven by science, people start to believe more and more. As people get older and as people start to go through their own experiences, their own faith, their own journey, they start to believe.
This isn't true. As far as like people turning more and more to God, that's just statistically not true. But also, science is not proving any of those holy texts to be accurate. In fact, the field of not only science, but also history has been showing how inaccurate those particular holy books are. Just on the history Not to mention all of the natural phenomena that we experience in reality, but also the historical reliability of these books is decaying at a faster rate than it did in the past.
But then there's always those people that are atheists. There's always those people that don't want to believe. There's always those people that are going to stop you from believing. Always those people that are going to tell you, oh, there is no God. What you believe is wrong.
In my experience, most atheists pretty much keep to themselves, except when religious people want to try to tell us how we're immoral or we can't know truth or we can't have any kind of moral knowledge, or trying to make claims about us specifically, or they try to make claims about reality specifically. That's when we usually pipe up and start causing some problems, I guess, if you want to see just having a discussion being a problem. In my experience, most atheists out there are not trying to get you to disbelieve in a God. They're not trying to make you stop believing in anything in particular other than false information. In my experience, the people that are most likely going to come up to you unprovoked to tell you what you should believe or that you should stop believing in what you currently believe typically are evangelicals or religious people in general. In my experience, they are the first ones to come up and want to know what you believe and then try to persuade you using illogical and fallacious arguments to get you to believe what they believe, because it seems to be uncomfortable for some religious people that others don't believe exactly the same way that they do.
And so if you ever run across somebody who thinks like that, you ask them these 3 questions. Okay. Question number 1. What happens after you die?
Great question. I mean, I would expect this to come up in a conversation about God, because in the conversation about God, generally there's some kind of afterlife that is promised by whatever religious sect or denomination or group that you're currently a part of. As far as what happens after we die, we don't know. What we can tell you is how our bodies work, being that, energy is constantly in flux in our bodies. And once that energy stops flowing, it seems like we would just cease to exist. That's the best educated guess or hypothesis that we could probably come up with. There's nothing that suggests that our consciousness continues after we die. There's nothing to suggest that there's any kind of hereafter. Seems to me like the most likely situation is just that we just simply don't exist anymore. And I'm perfectly fine with that. For me, that particular answer seems to make this life so much more important. It brings a lot of meaning to my life because I know that this is probably the only life that I'm ever going to have. So I need to make the most of it. I need to do what I want to do. I need to, figure out what I think about things. I need to be my own person and live my own life. And so that brings a whole lot of purpose and meaning to my life. The fact that this is the only life that I'm going to get, it makes this life so much more precious to me. So that's what it does for me. I don't know what it does for other people, but that's what it does for me.
Science cannot tell you what happens after you die. It's as simple as that. Science cannot tell you what happens after you die.
Okay, but while religious holy texts have claims about what happens after we die, they're seriously lacking on evidence for those claims. So I'm not persuaded by ad hoc statements that seem to be a good idea, but in reality, the hypothesis of we just cease to exist seems to be far better supported than whatever religious holy text you want to pick up says about, what happens after we die. So like I said before, I don't think that anybody can know what happens after we die, but using science, we can come up with a best guess or a hypothesis about what happens when we die and after we die.
There's a bunch of guesses out there. There's a bunch of people that think they know, but science cannot prove what happens after you die. Science cannot tell you there's an afterlife, but religion can.
Religion can make claims about what happens after we die. They don't have any truth about what happens after we die because these are unsupported or ad hoc statements and claims about the afterlife, if there even is an afterlife. So if you're pitting science against religion, being that science is honest about its conclusions, being that we can't know, but here's our best guess, versus religion that's like, oh, we definitely fucking know. And let me tell you, if you do one little thing wrong, you're burning in hell.
Islam can. Christianity can. Okay? So it's one of those things where an atheist is going to tell you, oh, you know, there's no such thing as God. God doesn't exist and stuff like that. And be like, okay, no problem. What do you think happens after we die?
I mean, what are the reasons why I think that those things? I think those things because there's little to no evidence that suggests that God exists. And therefore, there's no evidence to suggest that there even is an afterlife, even if God does exist, because the current definitions of God are insufficient. They are not supported by any kind of evidence whatsoever. So the afterlife can exist separate from our current understandings of God. So just because whatever particular religion you're a part of has some kind of ad hoc statement about what happens after we die, I prefer the more honest position of saying that we don't know, but here's our best guess, as opposed to the absolute statement of this is absolutely what happens after we die. And, you know, you can't question this. You have to believe it. You know, all that dogmatic faith and shit.
Do you think it's just nothing? Do you think it's just, oh, you were here and now you're not? Do you think it was just, oh, once you existed, now you don't?
I mean, that does make this life a bit more meaningful, doesn't it? Like, to me, that puts a whole lot more emphasis on the life that we have now. If there's nothing after this life, that means this is the only life that you have. So, I mean, to me, that makes life way more precious. My precious.
And if that is the case, why would you not believe or have faith in a higher power or an afterlife? Because if you lived a horrible life here on earth, and then, like I said, there's nothing more to it, then why would you not want to believe? Why would you not hope that there's more? Why would you not want there to be more?
I mean, sure, I could want there to be more. I mean, honestly, I don't want there to be an eternity after this life, because I feel like you would eventually go insane if there was an eternity after this life. In any case, I don't see this as a compelling reason to believe. Just because you don't want to die, or just because you don't want this to be your only life, it doesn't mean that that translates to reality. Like, you know, I could want a unicorn to fly in and shit out a whole bunch of rainbow ice cream into like a bowl. But just because I want that to be true doesn't mean that it's actually true. I have to follow the evidence where it leads me. And where the evidence leads me is to just not existing after this life. And I mean, honestly, I don't think I'm going to have an opinion about it when that happens, because I'm not going to exist. I'm not going to have an opinion. But what I will say is that that's a reason why I want to make this life the best life that I can live. That I don't want my life to be bad. That's why I want to make a good life for myself, my family, my friends, and, you know, everybody else. I want to have a good life, and so I'm making that happen. And it's because this is the only life that I know that I'm going to get. So it's not that good of an idea to appeal to emotion here like he's trying to do, trying to suggest, oh, well, wouldn't it be better if this were to happen? It's like, that might be better, sure, but I mean, you wish in one hand, shit in the other, and see which one fills up faster.
Okay. The second question you can ask any atheist is, what happened before the Big Bang?
Oh, shit, you got me there. Oh, fuck, now I believe in God. No, seriously. So what happened before the Big Bang? We don't know, and we probably will never know. But what we can know for certain is that whatever occurred prior to the Big Bang doesn't really have an effect afterwards, because, you know, the universe inflated and everything like that. So whatever existed before, if anything existed at all, it doesn't have an effect on us now. Just because we don't know, or will never be able to know, what happened prior to the inflation of the universe, I don't see that as a good argument for God. Honestly, that seems like a very small gap for God to reside in. Because at this point, we've got the inflation of the universe, and then natural shit takes place after that. And everything that happened after the inflation can be explained by the natural laws of reality and nature and all that. And so that leaves God outside of space and time, which is a very small gap for that motherfucker to live in. But again, just like the first question, I don't know, and science will probably never be able to find out. But the thing is that religious people don't know either. Nobody knows. So this seems to be like just a really bad question to ask as far as getting an atheist to shut up, because it's like the answer is, well, I don't know. Probably will never know. But the thing is you don't know either.
Okay. What happened before the Big Bang? So scientists still do not understand the Big Bang. Pretty much it's like the universe cannot be created, or the energy in the universe cannot be created or destroyed. Everything is, is fixed.
That's kind of a poor way to understand the first law of thermodynamics there, because what it means is that the sum of the energy in the universe is fixed at zero, is essentially what that is. Now, that doesn't mean that the energy is fixed necessarily. It just means that within that grand equation of energy in the universe, it must always be at like this zero sum. And that's a balancing act between, positive energy and negative energy that exists in our universe. The negative energy is supplied by gravitational forces and all this other stuff. It can be kind of complicated to explain. That's way deeper than what this guy or any evangelical or religious person would be willing to go. But the thing is that the first law of thermodynamics just states that energy cannot be created nor destroyed. It doesn't say anything about releasing potential energy, which is what happened in the inflation of the universe. This energy was released from a quantum scalar field when it fluctuated from a false vacuum state to a true vacuum state. We know that when this happens, an immense amount of energy can be released, and that's what indeed happened with this quantum scalar field. So no energy was created nor destroyed. It was just released from this quantum scalar field. You could think of it in smaller scale, being just like an explosion, which is why it's typically called the Big Bang. It's kind of a misnomer because it wasn't really a bang. There was no medium for a bang to travel through as far as sound waves go. When chemicals react and they end up exploding, like with TNT or other explosives, what they're releasing is chemical energy, right? They're releasing the chemical energy that's stored in these compounds. And so it's not like energy is created whenever a bomb goes off or something like that. Chemical energy is released and it's converted into heat energy and other types of energy and, blows up. And so nothing is created in that scenario. I mean, you can say things are destroyed because, shit gets destroyed when shit explodes. But the chemical energy that is released is just transformed from chemical energy into heat energy. And so that's what happens. I mean, it's a similar concept for the quantum scalar field. This energy is just released. So saying that science can't explain the Big Bang or the inflation of the universe, while we don't know for 100% certain what caused it, we definitely know like the mechanisms and everything of the expansion of the universe. We've been able to suss this out through direct observations in other parts of the universe, through us observing space in general. So I mean that's how we know these things. Science definitely trumps religion in this area, because while we can explain the intricacies of the mechanisms that go into these natural explanations, religion just has big old wizard went poof and created the universe, and that's what they have. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, as you can tell.
But the Big Bang, people love to ask, if Big Bang was the beginning, what happened before? So pretty much it's like, if the Big Bang is the start of it all, what happened before? If the Big Bang is the effect, what was the cause?
Okay, so there's a few questions here. It's nonsensical to ask what happened before the Big Bang. Space-time was created with the inflation of the universe. So saying that there was a time before the Big Bang is kind of nonsensical in the way that we understand time to work now. What existed prior to the inflation of the universe, we don't know. We probably will never know, like I said before. We can't analyze what happened before the Big Bang in the same ways that we analyze how things operate now in our universe with space-time, because space-time just simply didn't exist. So saying was there a time before the Big Bang is kind of nonsensical, and you really can't answer that question because there was no time. And then he asked about what was the cause of the Big Bang. You see, in quantum mechanics, a false vacuum state can exist in a quantum scalar field, and it doesn't necessarily need a cause in order for that quantum scalar field to fluctuate from that false vacuum state into a true vacuum state. There's this whole thing about quantum tunneling, if you want to look that up. There's a lot of different explanations that can explain how that fluctuation occurs. But in quantum mechanics, the effects can precede the causes, because the normal cause and effect doesn't exactly apply at the quantum scale. So when you're asking about, like, well, what was the cause of this, we can explain to you the best explanations that we have given the knowledge that we have now. What that means, though, is that if God does exist, then he exists in this very tiny quantum size of a space. He exists in this fluctuation from the false vacuum to the true vacuum. Right now, we have plenty of reasonable explanations for how that could have occurred, including it doesn't need a reason. It could just do it randomly. It seems like there's no need for the God explanation.
Okay. Science cannot tell you what happened before the Big Bang. Atheists cannot tell you what happened before the Big Bang. So it's one of those things where all you have to do is ask him these questions, and you'll realize that not only can nobody prove anything, but at the end of the day, they're going to try to make it seem like you having faith and you believing is a bad thing. And it's like, statistically, probability-wise, why would you not believe?
Probability-wise, why would you not believe? Like, I don't understand what that means exactly. Maybe he's going to go on to explain it, but it just makes me think of Pascal's wager. Like, science can't explain this thing, so that means that for the sake of your soul and for the sake of your afterlife, you should definitely believe in these things. And that always makes me question, like, which afterlife are you talking about here? Because there's several different afterlives, but not only are there several different afterlives, going back to the first question that he had, but coming to this question now, there's also several ideas about how this universe was created. Of course, you have the Abrahamic explanation of the sky wizard spouting an incantation and creating everything out of literally nothing. And then you've got like the Aboriginal creation story where this giant rainbow serpent like vomited the universe out. And then you have like the old Greek and Roman myths of Titans creating everything, or shit being created and Titans ruling the earth and all this other stuff, and then some other kind of thing. My point is that there's several different creation myths out there, and it's quite interesting to look into them. And actually, KC has a little KC's Corner where she kind of goes over some of these creation myths. Y'all should really check it out. I'll have it linked in the cards or down in the description. All of these creation myths have an equal likelihood because the rainbow serpent, vomiting creation out, or however that happened in the Aboriginal myths, has as much evidence as the sky wizard speaking an incantation to create everything out of nothing. That being that there's no evidence that solidly concludes that happened or supports that conclusion. So they're equally likely, just like I can't say that, there isn't some deity that created the universe in some kind of fashion. I also can't say that deity isn't a giant rainbow snake that exists outside of space and time. I feel like both of those are viable explanations on the religious side. So if you really want to speak statistically or probabilistically, you have non-religious being 50% and religious being the other 50%. But the religious side is broken up into all the little different pieces that have these different explanations for what happened at the beginning of the universe. So you're basically taking 50% on this non-religious idea of everything just happened naturally, right? Versus the small sliver of like whatever percentage is of the explanations, religious explanations that have been dreamed up. If you're speaking probabilistically, it seems like the non-religious idea of it just happening naturally is your best bet.
Why would you not believe? Okay. The third thing that you can ask an atheist is, what is consciousness? Science still does not know what consciousness is.
I think that that's not exactly correct. I mean, we can explain what consciousness is and everything like that. What we can't do is explain everything about consciousness. So I don't think that that's a compelling reason to believe in God either, because what we have found is that everything that we have thought is supernatural or magical or something along those lines has always turned out to be a natural explanation for it. And so while we don't understand completely what consciousness is or how it works or anything like that, I feel pretty confident in the future we will probably figure all that out, and it'll probably be a natural explanation, because our brains are not magical. And the explanation for why we have consciousness being, chemical reactions that happen in a complex central nervous system explains why other creatures seem to have some semblance of sentience out there, like dogs and cats, dolphins, and other incredibly smart creatures seem to have some level of sentience or consciousness out there. So while we don't understand it completely, that doesn't automatically mean that it's some kind of magical property of the human condition. It doesn't mean that God is necessary for consciousness to exist. I think consciousness would exist regardless of whether or not a God exists, because consciousness is just an emergent property of a complex central nervous system, and that's it. It's incorrect to say that science doesn't understand consciousness or can't explain consciousness. A more correct statement would be that science can't completely describe or explain consciousness. And that's not a compelling reason to believe in God either.
Meaning, if an atheist is telling you, oh, this is why you shouldn't believe, oh, this is why you shouldn't have faith, oh, this is why you shouldn't believe that there's a God.
Can't speak for every atheist out there, but I will never do that. Ultimately, I don't care if somebody believes in God. I don't care if Ray Comfort fucking believes in God. What I care about is that Ray Comfort says that you can't be a good person without believing in God, or at least you can't explain why being good is a positive trait without God, especially if you consider that he's a Christian and it's the Abrahamic God, and the Abrahamic God's rather brutal in the Old Testament, which is common to, all three branches of it now. It really doesn't make a lot of sense on that whole idea, but neither Casey nor I will ever tell anybody that they should not believe in God for whatever reason. I think that it's a rather irrational thing to believe in God because you have to have these illogical and fallacious reasoning in order to get to God. So I think that believing in God for those reasons is irrational, but that doesn't mean that I think that anybody out there is irrational on the whole. And I also don't think that means that they shouldn't believe in God. I think that, for whatever reason that you believe in God, as long as you have come to that conclusion, you have considered the evidence, and that's what you have concluded, I'm perfectly fine. I don't care if someone has an irrational belief. As long as it doesn't affect people in society or around them, I'm perfectly fine with it. When it starts getting pushed on other people through the government, through, personal interactions or whatever, when people are trying to force their irrational beliefs on other people, that's when I have a problem. But even when I have a problem with it, I'm not going to tell that person, you need to stop believing in God.
Be like, do you even know what consciousness is? Do you even know why you think the way you do? Do you even know why you feel the way you do?
Well, the the way that I think and the way that I feel and all this other stuff is a product of genetics as well as environment and experience. So all of those things kind of come together to shape the person that you are, how you think, why you think certain things, why you think one thing is better than another or whatever. Like all of that is explained by your experience, your environment, and your genetics. So that's why.
And if you can't explain it, would you rather have faith in something where science 80% proves? Or would you rather just not believe at all and just be a pessimist? Or would you rather just not believe at all and just be an atheist? Even though the universe is fine-tuned, one thing goes wrong and everything's not the way it's supposed to be. The earth is in the Goldilocks zone. Everything is so fine-tuned. Physics is so fundamental that if you change one thing, everything collapses.
That's not exactly true. I mean, these are some bold statements, and he's kind of like sort of shotgunning it here a little bit. He's got a wide spread on the different kinds of arguments. Like, it kind of sounded like he was starting off by comparing science being able to know like 80% of things. It's like, would you rather do that, or would you rather be a pessimistic atheist? And it's like, what do those two things have to do with each other? Like, I don't know the comparison that he was trying to make there, and he was trying to lay out. Maybe he's trying to say, wouldn't you rather have a mixture of science and faith? Because right before that point, he was talking about, wouldn't you rather have faith in something and also have not science explain like 80% of things? I would rather follow the evidence where it leads. And if there's no evidence to support a particular conclusion, then I would prefer not to believe it. I don't see why it would be necessary to then involve faith in this particular context. So it seems to be an irrational comparison of different things. Like, would you rather to have faith rather than not believe? And it's like, I would just rather know the truth of reality. And if currently the belief that God exists isn't supported by evidence, then I'm just not going to believe it. Then he mentioned the whole fine-tuned universe thing, which is kind of where the whole widespread shotgun effect kind of comes in here, because he goes off on this sort of tangent about the earth being in the Goldilocks zone, and how if you change one particular thing about our universe, it all falls apart. It's not that way. If you just take the Goldilocks zone, for example, the Goldilocks zone is pretty big, but also our planet has a standard deviation in the orbital path around the sun on the order of like something like 2 to 3 million miles. At one point around the sun, it's closer to the sun, and another point is farther away, and it's more than just, like maybe a couple hundred miles. Like, it's, on the order of millions of miles. In the orbit around the sun, that deviation isn't enough to kick us out of the Goldilocks zone, because the Goldilocks zone's huge. So even if you were to like enlarge our orbit around the sun, or change our orbit around the sun just a little bit, it's not going to cause that big of a difference in this particular respect. Likewise with the rest of the universe, if you can change certain aspects of it, and shit will just work different. It's this whole idea that, our universe is perfectly fine-tuned, and if you change any particular constant that we have in our universe, then our universe just doesn't exist. It crumbles, as I think said. But that's actually proven to not be true, because we simply don't know what other values could exist out there. What other configuration of these values could exist where another universe would pop up? That's such a larger question than he is presenting it here. And we've actually done plenty of models where the constants have different values. Now, they're not hugely different. They are different. And we've come away with universes still being able to form and all this other shit. So it seems like it's not on that of a fine tuning as a lot of apologists like to make it out to be. What I think happens with this in apologists is that they hear some kind of buzzword from scientists who are seriously simplifying the science behind what they've researched or the topics. And, these apologists with their rudimentary understanding of science take that and run with it. And that's how you get universes being fine-tuned. Of course, that's not exactly helped by the fact that you have a certain number of religious, like physicists and astrophysicists and all this other stuff, that, basically throw gasoline onto the fire. But the ultimate thing is that we don't know what these values could be and still produce a universe as far as, big changes to these constants. We have been able to model different values, but they've been, slight changes to those values.
So do you mean to tell me that everything just happened by chance? Everything just happened by accident? Everything just happened by luck?
So I wouldn't say that things just happen by chance or by luck necessarily. I do think random chance does have a big play in, things that do happen, but that's driven by just how the natural world interacts with itself. There's this famous line that says that if we knew the speed and direction of every single atom in the universe, then we could reliably predict the future. We could know what happens. And, on a little bit larger scale than atoms, at least, and a little bit more close to home, we can determine future events now using science, because that's one of the benefits of science, is that we have predictable models. Like, we know that if, you heat water enough, then it's going to eventually turn into steam. We know these things. We know that those things are going to happen. And we can also use this like in meteorology, because we can, know what's going to happen before it happens. And I mean, that right there, there's a lot more variables that play into it. So generally what you hear from meteorologists, like on your local news, is going to be for a wide area. So like you hear, 50% chance of rain, and then it doesn't rain at your house, doesn't mean that it didn't rain somewhere else. They're trying to give information for a wider area than just your particular square foot of earth that you currently reside on. But still, like with meteorology or any of the other sciences, we do have a predictable type of model that we can know that certain things are going to happen. And so we can predict the future that way. So by chance, kind of, but not in the way that he's mentioning it.
Okay. So it's one of the things, like I say, you just ask atheists these questions and you just watch them give you the answer. It'd be like, what happens after you die? What happened before the Big Bang? What even is consciousness? And you can sit there and watch them squirm around because they're not going to be able to tell you the answer. And it's as simple as that.
But I mean, I've spent the last, 25 to 30 minutes here answering these questions, probably more in depth than you were expecting. Probably more in depth than he was expecting, and probably more in depth than any evangelical or religious person that's like coming up to you and trying to get you to stop talking about whatever in the fuck he thinks is happening. I don't think that any of these questions should cause anybody pause. If you're interested in having these kind of conversations, I would definitely suggest getting caught up on some of these explanations for things. And there's plenty of resources out there on the internet from reputable educational resources about the beginning of the universe, the inflation of the universe, of consciousness, of, how our bodies work as far as death goes. There's plenty of educational resources out there for you to look into that and be able to form your opinion on what happens or what did happen or what's going to happen. So if you're going to be having these kind of conversations, I definitely suggest that you look into that and be prepared. Obviously, I don't think that any of these three questions should cause anybody pause, especially not pause enough to start believing in God. Just because, there's decision between the religious explanation and the scientific explanation for a number of these things. Just because science doesn't have a concrete answer right now doesn't mean that the automatic decision should be religious belief. That's not the default position. You can choose to not know the answer to the question because you don't have enough evidence, I guess, which would be the side of science. But I mean, science is going to be honest with you. Science is going to say, well, we don't know right now. We don't have the evidence to support what they're saying, but we also don't have any evidence for any particular conclusion over here about it. We still have to figure this shit out. And so I choose to go with the more honest answer of I don't know. And you can have an agnostic position on anything, not just God, but you can have an agnostic position on any particular question where you've got sort of a dichotomy there. You could remain in the I don't know category, or you don't care. You could just simply not give a fuck. Like what happens after we die, what happened before the inflation of the universe, or anything like that, or what consciousness is. It's perfectly fine to not give a fuck about those things and still be an atheist. Like, you don't have to be religious in order to, be fine with whatever answer you come up with for these particular questions. Whether that be, I don't know, I don't care, or a magical wizard did it. One of these things is not like the other. But all in all, I found these 3 questions to be insufficient and causing me to pause. And they definitely didn't cause me to stumble. And they definitely didn't cause me to squirm or anything like that. And it's obviously not gotten me to shut up. So that's not happening anytime soon. Y'all are stuck with me. Get used to it. But anyways, I would love to know what you guys think about these 3 questions. Let me know down below in the comments. I'd really love to hear what you guys think about them. While you're down there, why don't y'all smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.